Okay, so here we are. We've been itching to do an interview about DACA for quite a while. James, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I
Make sure my sound's on. Can you hear me?
can hear you.
All right, cool. So we'll wait for a couple people to come on, but while we're waiting, James is a partner here at the Scott Law Firm. He has talked to me that he's very frustrated about what everybody's talking about with DACA. He's frustrated about the representations of DACA, the things that are being said about it. So James has come up with about 9 myths about DACA that he wants to talk about. So I'm going to let him talk about those. But first, there's a lot of people, James, that just don't know what is DACA. It's talked about a lot. But what is DACA?
Well, thanks, Woody, and thanks for the chance to talk to you. DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was an executive order issued by President Obama back in 2012. It was an opportunity for undocumented immigrants that came to the United States as children to apply for what's called deferred action. But it's not a pathway to citizenship. It's basically an agreement with the government that they are not going to take you into custody and they're not going to deport you for right now. There is a process for applying for DACA, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But generally, the requirements are that you have had to come to the United States before you were 16 years old. You had to have arrived in the United States before June of 2007, and you've had to continuously reside in the United States from June of 2007 through June of 2012. You additionally cannot have any serious convictions on your records or even arrests, no felonies, no significant misdemeanors, even no misdemeanors if you have 3 or more. Those are some of the requirements for DACA, but I think what is generally misunderstood about it is how many people actually qualify for this deferred action. And I think that when we hear about this in the news, we hear about this in the media, whether it's President Trump or Jeff Sessions or other people talking about it, even some of the journalists that are covering this in some of the major news publications, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of who this actually applies to and what are the requirements, what's really going on with DACA.
So what is it that people are getting wrong about DACA?
Well, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I think the main thing that is conflated or misunderstood is that this is some sort of amnesty, that this affects everybody that enters the United States and or at least all children that enter the United States, and that it is a pathway to citizenship. Even though currently it's being rescinded by President Trump, it never was a pathway to citizenship. This was basically a deferred action that puts you in a legal limbo situation where you're not able to adjust your status, you're not able to gain future status. You're basically just you're put to the side. You're able to get a driver's license, you're able to get a work authorization, but other than that, there's a lot of things that you're ineligible for. And so you don't have a lot of the same rights as residents or citizens or things like that. And you don't have a way to become a resident or a citizen in the future.
So when you say adjustment status, you're talking about a green card, right? I mean, they just can't get a green card. And by extension of that, they can't become a citizen, because to become a citizen, you need to be a permanent resident, have a green card first, right? Yeah.
Another thing that I think that is really misleading is that DACA is creating an increase in border crossing, or an increase in illegal border crossing into our country. And just very recently, I have this tweet from President Trump from April 1st, so last month. And he says that he's talking about this caravan of people going through Central America and into Mexico, coming to the United States for asylum. But he says these big flows of people are all trying to come here and take advantage of DACA. They want in on the act. In my opinion, I think this is incredibly misleading and this is misguided. This is wrong. These people are not coming here for DACA. We talked about some of the requirements earlier, but DACA requires that you had entered the United States over a decade ago. That's 2007, June of 2007. So anybody that's entered the United States between June of 2007 and now does not qualify for DACA. They're not getting it. There's no way that they can get it. And so to say that this is causing people to come to the United States at any age right now, I think is really misleading. It's not these people that are coming to the United States undocumented. That could be a different problem, but DACA is not the cause of that. Another myth, another misunderstanding that I find in talking to family and friends or listening on the radio or reading in the news is that all undocumented kids are automatically getting DACA. That's not true. This is a strict application-based process. It's several pages of applications. It requires a filing fee. I think the fee is $495. Correct me if I'm wrong, Woody.
No, you're right.
And there's a complicated process of having to document your continuous presence in the United States. Often this requires you to hire an immigration lawyer and spend thousands of dollars on an immigration lawyer to help you navigate through the complex rules and regulations for DACA to hopefully get a grant. And so that kind of is in line with the next one that I found is that it's easy to obtain. Again, it's very document heavy. One of the requirements is that you document your continuous presence in the United States from June of 2007 through June of 2012. And so
just want to interrupt real quick. We got just getting some saludos. We're getting some love from Marina Miranda, who is our client, and so she's just sending us a wave. So I'm just going to give her a wave back. Thank her for commenting on here.
And so what I was saying is from June of 2007 to June 2012, you have to document that you were continuously present in the United States during that time period. And keep in mind, this is somewhat of an arbitrary timeline that the government has picked to prove that you were here in the United States. But that was well over a decade now that you now have to find records in a situation where oftentimes you may not have a lot of records. Again, you don't have a driver's license, you don't have work authorizations, and a lot of times it's just difficult to prove that you were physically here. I find that that's a common problem that Woody and I run into all the time when we're sitting down with people who are otherwise eligible for DACA, but there are these hurdles that they have to prove in order to get it. And it's very difficult to go back and prove. Sometimes these years, they were young children. And so, having documents to show that a young child was in the United States during a specific period of time, it can be very difficult.
And, one of the requirements is that you have to show that you were present on the United States on June 15th, 2007 and June 15th, 2012, which incidentally is in the middle of the summer. So a lot of the young people who were applying for this, not even their school records were able to prove that they were physically present on those 2 days. So that's just an extra hurdle, and they probably didn't plan that out very well. But just adding on to what you're talking about, the document requirements.
Right. Another misunderstanding I encounter when I'm talking to friends and family about DACA is that this is a major crime risk. They're concerned that these individuals now, if they're given some sort of temporary or the ability to stay here and work, that these people are criminals, or this is increasing the crime in the United States. And I find that this is wholly untrue. These individuals are sort of the cream of the crop. Again, when you're applying for DACA, you have to go through background checks. You have to list any convictions or any arrests that you've ever had, and it strictly prohibits any significant misdemeanors, felonies, and sometimes even multiple traffic violations can be a violation and make you ineligible for DACA. The other thing is that we've seen this as well, is that it's very easy to lose. If you currently have DACA and then you're accused of a crime or you're arrested, even if you haven't been convicted, it can be taken away from you very easily. The government can rescind it. You're not able to get it back. So I think that it is very misleading to say that these people are criminals. If they have DACA currently, by definition, they cannot be a criminal. And so that's one of the things that I find very frustrating when you hear people like Jeff Sessions and President Trump talking about them and associating them with some of the crime that's happening with immigration.
And are you seeing that at all, where somebody might have DACA and, presumably somebody has DACA, they have to be a high school graduate at least. So a lot of them are in college or are college aged. And have you seen it where somebody gets a DWI, is just arrested for it? I mean, what happens with that person?
Absolutely. I've had a client that had DACA that was arrested for a DWI, and while he was in custody, his family received a notice from USCIS notifying him that they were rescinding his DACA. And oftentimes there's not the ability to contest that. It kind of just happens. They send you a letter and they say, we're taking this away because we believe you failed to live up to the standards that are required in order to maintain DACA status, or not status, but your DACA grant.
And that's just with an arrest, right? No conviction or anything. Wow. Incredible.
Another misunderstanding that I hear or I read about is that they don't pay any taxes. And I think this is a pretty major one as well. And I found a statistic that according to the 2017 Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, DACA grantees have actually paid over $2 billion in state and local taxes that's pumped into our economy. Again, these are kind of the cream of the crop. They're high school graduates. Oftentimes they're going to college. They're getting advanced degrees, and they're getting higher skilled work. These are people that pay taxes. These are people that we should be encouraging in our economy that can contribute and inject money back into the economy. These are not people that aren't paying taxes generally, and I've seen that, and I think you have as well, Woody. Another misunderstanding that I've run into or I've heard is that they're taking advantage of our welfare systems, or they're getting Medicaid and they're getting health insurance, and that we're paying for that. And that's a fundamental misunderstanding as well. DACA grantees are not eligible for Medicaid. They're not eligible for health care under the Affordable Health Care Act, which I think is unfortunate, but it's misleading to say that they're taking advantage of those systems. Another misunderstanding that I've seen, another myth, is that they're getting free college. I don't know why people might think that that's the case, but it's actually the opposite. They're not eligible for federal financial aid. And additionally, oftentimes, we know from people that we know personally, they've had to pay what's called international tuition rates, which are actually even higher than out-of-state tuition to colleges. So they're paying even more than what your out-of-state student would be paying at most college institutions. And just real quick, finally, the last thing that I hear about that I'd like to address is that I think there's this concern or this fear that they are stealing jobs from the American workforce. And I really think that that's misguided. I think that that's a zero-sum view on our economy, a belief that there's a limited amount of jobs, and the less people that are available, the more people that enter the country that are available for jobs are taking away from these. I think that's a misunderstanding of how our job market works. First of all, 800,000 dreamers, which is kind of the current estimate of how many DACA grantees are currently in the market, is a tiny drop in the American workforce labor. But I think that the idea that just by having these new people come in that they're taking away jobs, I think is misleading. Again, these are skilled laborers. They're usually higher educated. A lot of times you're seeing these Silicon Valley companies that are employing dreamers. You're seeing IT firms. These are really the types of jobs that there is actually a lower unemployment rate than there are available jobs. And so I think it's misleading to say that they're really taking away from that workforce.
And, one of the questions that we had and one of the comments when we were kind of announcing that we were going to be talking about that is somebody asked, so what is the future of DACA right now? And that's kind of a confusing bit right there. Can you weigh in on that?
Well, I think we don't really know. Unfortunately, it's kind of, and Woody, I think this is tough because we know we have friends that are dreamers. We know a lot of people that we've helped get as immigration lawyers. But I think it's frustrating because we don't really know what the future is going to be. It's kind of currently being battled, and there's a lot of back and forth. It seems like there's a new announcement every day. But I think the problem with it, and I think one of the reasons why there seems to be a major shift back and forth, is that there's a misunderstanding of what it actually is. And I think that if more people actually knew about it or knew who these people were new people that had DACA, that were dreamers, I really think that this is something that most people would support. This is something that most people would be for, but for this misunderstanding, and some of that I think is coming directly from the White House, directly from the president.
Yeah, and right now, of course, the president tried to end the program in, I believe it was September of last year. They thought that the program would end by March of this year, but some federal judges have stepped in and at least for now, saved the program. And so anybody that has DACA can currently renew, and we encourage somebody that has DACA to renew because, like James said, we just don't know what's going to happen in the future. But probably if you have it, they won't be able to take it. Maybe they won't allow you to renew in the future. But so renew as early as you can. But it was about 3 weeks or so ago that a federal judge in I can't remember for what district, but his ruling is nationwide that he said that DACA can't be arbitrarily taken away, like what was done. That their legal rationale was not, the president's legal rationale to take it away was not sound, and actually that he was going to order that even new people who are now eligible for DACA be able to apply. So that's good news. But he gave the government 90 days to respond to his order. So we probably have about 60 days left on that to see. So James, do you feel better getting some of that off your chest, talking about the myths of DACA?
I feel a little bit better. We'll see how the next conversation goes with discussing DACA with some family and friends. Hopefully it goes a little bit better, a little bit smoother.
Well, probably some more work to do. But you know what? I think, you and I were talking about doing a podcast on just various issues. Yeah. And I think DACA is going to be one of them. What do you think?
Absolutely. I'd love to do it.
We'll get a DACA dreamer on, and we'll announce more on that. So, all right. Well, till the next time.